directed towards community as opposed to directed towards chaos.
And the beloved community was a big theme in his life, and it was something that he talked about a lot. In what way do you think the beloved community is not yet understood?
Well, the community for him was not. It was also a world community.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Influenced by Gandhi.
Yes.
Certainly.
Yes.
Against the Vietnam War.
Yes.
Right.
That war was not a good thing. It was
Yes.
not helping people. He saw community as a much wider thing. I always want to have hope in the future, but I'm getting a little discouraged now about community because I'm not seeing as much community as I would like to see.
It's more chaotic.
It's more chaotic, and I
Yeah.
guess I have to stop listening to political candidates who I don't think speak of community as I define community. It's a very narrow community depending upon which group they're talking to at the time.
I think you're right. King's community was global, and that's why I said the book was ahead of its time, because we're living in a global community
Certainly
now.
are.
What happens in China affects America. What happens in Africa affects Europe. What happens in Europe, it's our economies are tied together, and so what happens here in America has a rippling effect throughout the world, and so King's community was global, and the concept of the beloved community again is couched in the gospel from the teachings of Christ. Everything that Dr. King did reflected on his upbringing, reflected on his moral code. It reflected on who he was as an individual.
Yeah. So one of the books, or one of the letters I read was letters from a Birmingham jail. Now that was, I reflect on that back. You thinking about going to the white churches of the time, and the letter that he was responding to in that book was written by white pastors, and the white pastors basically said, now is not the time. You have to have more patience. There were a number of arguments that he was responding to, and he said, well, there is always a time to now is the time. It is always right to do justice. Justice was the thrust of that entire treatise. So, have we gotten any further beyond that? Are we still, or do we still use the same arguments that the white ministers were saying? Because I'm looking at, when I pick up the newspaper and I look at the headlines, it seems like Ferguson, the Black Lives Matter campaign, and the responses to that. There's the young black boy who was shot. Tamir Rice, right? There are all these stories that come up that kind of remind me of what was going on even in Dr. King's life, and so in what way have we not gotten beyond that?
Well, I think we've made many steps forward, but we still have a long way to go. And I sometimes more recently feel we're backtracking a little bit too much. I worked a lot in voter registration in the projects in Atlanta. Many more blacks, African Americans, were voting than ever before. Many more African Americans have been elected to public office nationwide than ever before, ever since the days of Reconstruction, back in the post-Civil War period. Affirmative action. More African Americans and other minority groups have been able to go to college. Schools have been integrated. Younger people think nothing of having a classroom of Asian American students, Hispanic students, African American students, white students. It's like, well, they're just my classmates, my kids. So I think we've come a long way. But I really worry now about some of the restrictions I'm hearing. The problem with the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act, for example. Oh, now you have to have a photograph, and now you have to have this, and it depends on what state. That really bothers me. I don't think we have a community in Congress anymore the way we did. I don't think we have statesmen and stateswomen. I'm afraid we just have politicians, and that really bothers me. For example, the Voting Rights Act. Are they looking at the nation and what's best for the people that they were elected to serve, the entire nation, or are they looking at who can vote for me? And I'm really very bothered by that now. I don't know if you agree, Greg.
I do agree, and I agree that we have more politicians as opposed to statesmen and stateswomen, and politics, we see it in the news, is big business.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and you know, stroke the coattail of whoever writes a check, honestly.
Right.
And so in some respects, yes, I see us regressing. We have made progress to a varying degree. Unfortunately, it's challenging for America to deal with the subject of racism. It's challenging for America to deal with our history. And one of the other things that Dr. King really lectured on and really taught about is understanding fear. Fear is what we don't understand. We fear what we don't understand.
That's right.
And so right now, we are living in a post-anxious America because we're afraid.
Yeah.
And so the stuff that's being shared is out of fear. Not too much different 40 years ago.
Right.
Really. It's colored differently. It sounds a little bit different, but the rhetoric is the same. We're going to build a wall
Yeah.
to keep out immigrants from Mexico. Joe, every citizen in this country is an immigrant from somewhere.
Oh, I know.
Right. Right.
I'm a third generation American. You have no argument for me.
So what makes this time and this place different now?
I know.
That we want to be so isolated, to isolate ourselves from being open, when the proposed idea of this country was founded on freedom.
Right. Well, and freedom is something that that King talked a lot about, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that free at last,
I
free
was
at,
just thinking
you know,
that. Yeah.
you know, it's
always free at last.
That always gets me. It gives me
Yeah.
shivers when I remember that part of it. And I that speech. My guests today have been, our Reverend Dr. Greg Johnson and Doctor. I won't give you the Reverend yet.
No, I didn't earn it.
Yeah, Dr. Linda
She's
Biemer.
still preaching though.
Yeah, she's doing a good job, isn't she? So we're talking more about the unfinished legacy of King. And one of the books that I've been recently reading, and I Greg, I know that you've read it too, is the New Jim Crow, which is a book about prisons and prison reform and the legacy of what it means to have been incarcerated and then released into the United States. And so, is there a sense in which we've been talking about regressing, but is there a sense in which our own laws have kind of played a part in making that regression happen?
Oh, definitely. You start as far back as Ford and Nixon. The administration during Nixon's time looked at America and began to say, we're going to, his words, we're going to deal with the violence in America. What was he talking about?
Yeah.
White America wasn't experiencing any violence. So if you listen to Nixon and then move forward a few years, you begin to see in the Reagan administration the heavy hand of the law on crime and then the evolution to 3 strikes. All of that is a process in which we've regressed. It's set up, for the prison system up until 2000. Persons who were enrolled in prison were largely people of color and poor, and so up until 2000, the 3 Strikes Act was very prominent in the lives of people who were convicted of a crime, and if you were convicted of a crime the 2nd or 3rd time, you got a heavy penalty.
Right.
People were spending life sentences for things as simple, now we see them as simple, as walking into a store and picking up something and walking out. Not killing anyone, but stealing. I mean, that's a crime, yes, but it's a crime that someone should spend the rest of their life in jail for.
Or even go into jail where instead of being rehabilitated, they get hauled into an entirely different life because they have no other alternative after they're released. So they just go into the alternative community that we have. We call it the black market. Let's just call it, crime. It's a life of, it's a life that is spent living.
So you take a person out, a young adult, male or female, you take them out of their community, off the streets of being a citizen in the prime of their life, at 20 years old. Now, they spend 20 years in jail. What in the world is that going to do to an individual?
Right.
I mean, if they're not being rehabilitated. They come out, they have supposedly no rights. They're told they have no rights, and so really they're not even citizens, considered citizens. And our society has been, we've been brainwashed against crime, that criminals are not rehabilitatable. And so we see anybody with a criminal record as those people. And so we have not been fair, and we have not been graceful, nor have we been loving, not just to people we see every day, but to everyone in general.
And if we had more time, we could ask the question, what would Dr. King say about that? And I'm sure he would have a lot to say about that. But I want to tell you both, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. And what a great conversation we've had about the life and legacy of Martin Luther King. And I hope that all of you, our listening audience, have a great Martin Luther King Day, and may you remember some of his life, his legacy, and his unfinished work.